Hello, my name is Casper René Johansen and I'm a philosopher. I'm here to give you a survey about 5 different female philosophers. This is old-fashioned. Let's do this more untraditionally. So let me give you another introduction to this video. Hello, my name is Casper René Johansen and I'm your YouTube philosopher. This video here is about 5 different female philosophers, my favorite female philosophers. And we have to talk about this. I feel in this video that female philosophers has generally in tradition been overlooked too much, and it's not been really cemented how important these thinkers are to the philosophy of history, to philosophy in general. It's time now to do something about that, I think, and have more focus on female philosophers' contribution to philosophy, both in the philosophy of history, but also now. These are not ranked in accordance to who I think is best, because I cannot choose which one is my favorite of these 5. So they're not ranked in a hierarchy. They're ranked after their birth. So, all right, the first of these 5 favorite female philosophers is a woman called Diotima. She's called Diotima of Mantinea, and here's a Slovenian painting of her. Nobody really knows what she looked like, and this is actually supposed to be Socrates in this painting. We have to go back to 500 BC, and Diotima, this female philosopher, is actually shrouded in mystery, because nobody really sure if she really existed. She's only really described in a Plato's Dialogue Symposium, and this Plato's Dialogue Symposium, Socrates, which is always the main character in Plato's dialogue, Socrates, he tells of the story he's been told from Diotima, and Socrates actually called Diotima a wise woman. But why shouldn't she be real? Historians has been thinking about Diotima that almost every other person in Plato's dialogues, a real person, a real historical person. Why shouldn't Diotima have been a real historical person? I think she is, but the whole thing is really shrouded in mystery, because you only get her philosophy through this Plato's Symposium, and you get this very, very cool philosophical character who's a priestess actually. And that's also the thing in this ancient Greece. Women back then, they weren't considered that much value, and symposium is a kind of a party, and it's only a party for men, and men, philosophers, are in this Plato's Symposium dialogue. So it's also interesting that Socrates pulls up a female. She's not present at this symposium. She's kind of pulled not physically, but her words are there through Socrates. That makes actually a very interesting philosophical point in this symposium, that maybe the whole symposium dialogues is about love, is about eros, Interesting that this female voice, which only her voice and her intellect is present at this lecture on love, and not her physical form. And that's the main point of Diotima's philosophy that comes through this Plato's dialogue symposium, which is also very interesting, that in one to be fulfilled in your understanding of beauty and what beauty really is, it's not physical beauty. That's where you start, but you kind of move away from this particular beauty in one person to the beauty of seeing it in more persons, in more bodies, to generally discarding that this whole physical beauty, and you go toward beauty itself as a concept, and you move beyond physical beauty, but you also go past an intellectual description of beauty towards a kind of a non-descriptive beauty itself. At least that's what I understand in the symposium and with Diotima. So the reason why I really think she's one of my favorite female philosophers, mostly one of the ancient female philosophers of all time. She might be the first actually described female philosopher of all time, the first one. And not only that, she inspired Socrates, one of the first philosophers, herself. And Socrates in that dialogue called her a wise woman, and he actually says he learned what love was all about from her. And why is Hannah Arendt one of my favorite philosophers? Well, it's the way she always she wouldn't be generalized as a Jewish thinker. She wouldn't be generalized as a philosophical thinker. She always walked towards the stream, one could say. She was sent as a reporter on Adolf Eichmann trial, the infamous Nazi commander who deported all the Jews to the train to go to Auschwitz to be executed, to be gassed in the gas chambers at Auschwitz. She reported on that trial, and she wasn't a basic Jew that said, oh, the Nazi, they were evil, pure evil. The Germans and whole culture, they were evil. And a guy like Eichmann was a kind of demonic, evil character, psychopathic, evil character, in order to deport millions of Jews on these trains to go to Auschwitz. Well, Hannah Arendt discovered on that trial that this wasn't an evil man like that, a demonic character. He actually seemed very common. He seemed boring. He seemed bureaucratic. He seemed actually not that smart. So she came up with the whole idea of the banality of evil in order to explain how a common person in the Nazi regime would do these atrocities that they committed. And you can basically say why every common person around the world is capable of doing evil in maybe harsh times, maybe in a totalitarian regime. How can you do this evil? And that's the banality of evil, which I think is very interesting, that Hannah Arendt writes that people like Eichmann suspended their internal dialogue. They didn't moralize their actions. They didn't have the moral discussion, their inner dialogue themselves. They kind of suspended that and just Eichmann saw it very bureaucratic. I have to take these people, they have to come on a train, and they have to go there. He didn't speculate where they were going or they were dying. They had to be gassed. That wasn't. He didn't have that eternal dialogue. Is this wrong? Should I do this? Are these people? Is my act killing them? No, he suspended all that dialogue with himself and just put him on the train, because that was what he was told to do. And as he says in the trial, if I didn't do it, somebody else would appoint it and be doing it, and I might be shot for resisting a command like put him on the train and goes off. So this is the banality of evil, where you suspend all eternal dialogue, and that's also what she says may happen again. That is when we stop having these internal moral discussions with ourselves. Is my actions morally good, or is it morally bad? Eichmann didn't do that. There's something I really like about Hannah Arendt, and that's the way she labeled herself. She didn't label herself as a philosopher, actually. She labeled herself as a political thinker. And the reason for that is, according to her, a philosopher should be unbiased when it comes to politics or political thinking. A political philosophy should be unbiased. So she admits she's not perfect in her political philosophy because she has bias. So she calls herself a political thinker, which I think is a great thing for a great philosopher like her to admit her flaws as a political thinker. Or she admits that she did not strive towards and total unbiasedness in her political thinking. So this is interesting to me, and that's also the reason why she's on the list. There are no dangerous thoughts. Thinking itself is dangerous. Ponder about that. Now my third favorite female philosopher, let me just get into this female. I've been using that term through the whole course of this video, female, and the concept itself is a referation to male. There's male in the word female, and that's the whole idea also for me to bring about these female philosophers, in order to get also across how sad it is that these were kind of more or less neglected throughout the history of philosophy. Even when I was at the university, we didn't read that much female philosophers. I remember when Hillary was up against Obama to get the nomination for the Democratic Party, there were people saying to me, Hillary, they don't like him because this and that, and they don't like her politics because this and that, and I was kind of arguing, well, she could be good in this way, Obama could be this way. My point is that when it came down to it, many of these people brought forth the argument, well, she's a woman and Obama is a man. Like, that is, what do you mean by that? That she's lesser human, she's better at politics because she's a woman? That's the whole idea also, this video, to show that a woman has much to do with great philosophy as men. And I use the word female to unfortunately imply that even the concept of woman, again, woman, has the male into it, because we, unfortunately, from the beginning of human society, we have a male-oriented culture. which I would like to also start breaking apart. And also, of course, we are trying to break it apart in modern society. Or are we? We can also ponder about that, if we really are deconstructing this male-oriented society. But anyways, let's get back to my third favorite philosopher, who is Philippa Foot. And she was born in 1920, and she passed away in 2010. So she became 90 years old, and I have a picture of Philippa Foot here. And there's two major reasons why Philippa Foot is on one of my favorite women philosophers list here. And one thing is because she's one of the first. She's actually one of the first in modern times to bring forth virtue ethics. Really like this virtue ethics, because it kind of shows that not everybody has this virtue from beginning. You have to kind of with your phronesis, your cleverness, your philosophy, your moral inner discussion, your upbringing, you have to practice to become a good, virtuous, moral agent. The second reason for why Philippa Foot is on this list is because she brought forth the moral experiment, the moral, I don't know if it's a paradox, but the moral experiments, a thought experiment with no definitive answer. You have to speculate that about itself, but it's a very famous problem, philosophical problem, called the trolley problem. Hey, the trolley problem. You're on a train, it's going down the tracks, and you see three or four, five. You see five persons on this tracks. Let's say it's kids. It's five kids on this train, on this track, and you're gonna run them over if you don't stop the train. But you notice that the brakes doesn't work. So what to do? And you could see that you can switch the track and go away from the five kids. But then you notice a sixth kid, one kid on the other track. So if you pull the lever and switch tracks, you're gonna kill one kid instead of five. So what do? You cannot brake the train. That's the trolley problem. I'm not gonna give you a definitive answer from this trolley problem, because that's the whole thought experiment. But there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of solution to this problem, and it's still fairly discussed in philosophical circles. That's Philippa Foot. The next philosopher on my list is Martha Nussbaum. She's still alive today, so she's a current philosopher, born in 1947. And she attended Harvard University and was one of the first females to ever go to Harvard University. But in the 1970s, she found the environment sexist and anti-Semitic and homophobic as well. But that was in the 1970s. But she managed to get her PhD at Harvard University and became the first fellow junior there. And she taught at that university through the 1980s at Harvard University. Now, the reason why I like Martha Nussbaum's philosophy is because she's taken the fragility of human beings and sees us as fragile. She sees us as plant-like. Like a plant, we're soft and vulnerable, but yet we're capable of great growth, and we can grow through hardship. But also a thing I really like about Martha Nussbaum's philosophy is her idea of forgiveness. even though you have tremendous anger and you have reason to be angry, you shouldn't let that anger out. And you have to think about this in a political sense. She has the idea of you being able to forgive instead of become angry yourself. Like if the neighbor is angry with you and angry with your cat, your neighbor kills your cat. Well, you could be angry and about that, that's understandable, but what are you supposed to do? Kill your neighbor's pet, his dog. So now we have a dead cat and a dead dog. This leaves us nowhere. And she idolizes, by good means, Nelson Mandela. He was in prison for many years, but he was able to teach himself to forgive his enemy, the ones who put him in prison. So he never took his anger out when he was freed and eventually became president of South Africa. He never took his revenge. He never let out his anger. So that's also an interesting thing I like about Martha Nussbaum, that her whole idea of forgiveness, that we should be able to forgive. Now the last philosopher on my list is a woman named Anne Dufourmantelle. I hope I pronounce her name correctly. Unfortunately, she's not with us anymore. She died in 2017 trying to rescue two small children from drowning. Not here, somewhere in France. But the interesting thing is she wrote extensively on risk, and she praised taking a risk. And she kind of did at the end, taking a risk to try to save these children. And they survived, but unfortunately she drowned in the process. The kids were saved by lifeguard, but she drowned, sadly. But she says life begins with risk. There's no such thing as absolute security and zero risk. Life begins with risk. Life is risk. I'm so intrigued by this French philosopher Anne Doufourmantelle. I haven't read much of her work, but recently I started reading one of her works, and it's called Blind Date, Sex and Philosophy. She invites her readers into the bedroom for a blind date between sex and philosophy, which is really intriguing. Why is there a sort of aversion to sex in philosophy? Why is sex omitted from the whole idea of philosophy? Why it's gone almost completely from the philosophy of history? Because philosophy is about life, right? Well, how do life begins? Well, it starts in the bedroom. So this is an interesting book for me to read, and hopefully I will do a book review and a more in-depth on Anne Dufourmantelle's philosophy when I'm finished with this book at some. We come to the end of this video now, and it was very, very hard to narrow it down to only 5 philosophers. So unfortunately I have to omit somebody from this list in order to keep my goal on 5, only 5 philosophers, because there's a lot of great female philosophers out there, and I have to omit somebody like Simone de Beauvoir, who is Sartre's partner and a fellow existentialist and feminist, which I also like her philosophy. I had to omit that. And also I had to omit Judith Butler, who is a current philosopher, still alive, born in 1956, I think. And she kind of inspired this whole video for me to do it kind of genderless, because she's the one famous for her book Gender Trouble, about how gender is a kind of imitation for which there is no original, and gender is only a kind of performativity. It's something we perform. It doesn't really exist. It's not fixed or stable, our gender. It is more fluid. So she's one of the first of these LGBTQBT, I think it's called. So I will end that note on genderless and Judith Butler and say, what should I wear today? Should I wear a dress or a blazer? I don't know. What kind of gender am I? Am I a man or a woman? Is it really important if I'm a man or woman? Especially when it comes to philosophy, is it important which gender I am? I'll leave that question up to you. But personally, I don't think it's any issue or any importance if I'm a woman or man, if I do philosophy and if I write a philosophy book. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.